Welcome to another edition of CloseMode, the enterprise sales show. I'm Brian Dietmeyer, CEO of Close Strong. And today I'm really lucky to be here with Terrence Keys, who is the VP of Sales at Cogent Communications. And if you're not familiar with Cogent, they provide internet access and data transport over fiber optic, IP data only network. TK, how did I do?
Oh man, the value prop was strong, Brian. Strong. We could tighten up a few things at the end, but
Okay.
we'll get you there, brother. You might have the makings of a varsity player.
So we were chatting last week and started talking about sales leader time allocation, and it just struck me that right our time's at a premium. Especially, we've heard a lot that sales leaders don't have enough time to coach frontline reps. So that this whole notion of how do we allocate our time, since it is such a valuable commodity. So do you think? And furthermore, what you and I were talking about is sort of A, B, and C players, top performers, middle, and low performers. So, what's your sense about sort of ideal allocation of how much time you as a leader can spend with the different tiers, or should?
So, and in disclosure, I think when we looked at those A, B, and C players, realized that the people can move from B to A and C to B, etc.
Yes.
But I think that the ideal time allocation, like in a perfect world, would primarily be, if I'm honest, those folks in the middle would be
Yeah.
my prime piece. And the reason being, what I've seen in my experience, is that people who are A players, they're going to be A players, regardless of company they work for, what they're selling, who they're selling for. Those people have something in them that's going to just push them to excel.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that we don't foster that or we don't invest in it and spend time with it, but the realities are is that they have something in them. They were going to be workers regardless. And what we have to do with them is almost coach them or train them to be more self sufficient, because part of what has made them A players is they know how to, use all the resources around them. They
Yes.
know what they don't know. And in that sense, they end up being the most demanding, and if I'm honest, can be the biggest time suck, a valuable time suck, but realistically, there's a lot of things that they probably could accomplish on their own. So I would say that the majority of that time, ideal allocation would be my people who are in the middle. They haven't quite gotten it yet, but there's potential where we can get from
Right.
B to A. And that's really where you want to spend the time. Now, the folks who are at C, the reason why it's even less time there is because they just need to understand the basic blocking and tackling.
Right.
And if they can earn our trust and show that, hey, that they're invested in themselves enough to understand the basic in blocking and tackling and make some progress, they'll inherently move into that B group. And like I said, that's where the majority of the time will be spent, because that's going to be the biggest uplift, the biggest return on investment from my experience.
Yeah. So you bring up an interesting point, which is, spending time, allocating time, but one is reactive and one is proactive, right? I'm gonna go out and this is what I'm going to invest. But do you think, and you kind of leaned a little bit on your top tier players? Did I hear that you feel like you get more of those kind of reactive requests from top tier players than the other two tiers? And if so, how come?
100%. And the
Okay.
thing is, as sales leaders, we're part of this equation too, because what happens is, hey, Brian is an A player. Brian always comes to me and Brian generates revenue for me. So I'm going to prioritize that. But the realities is that Brian probably often comes to me with things that could be resolved before they even got to me. But you're so engaged, you're so enthusiastic, you're so in the weeds with your business, you're always utilizing the resources around you. So inherently it becomes reactive. You come to me and I know that you can get me revenue this month or this quarter, so I immediately focus on it and I put other things to the side. And ultimately what suffers are those people in the middle that aren't currently A players and won't be A players without the kind of support that Brian is proactively seeking, which makes me reactive, to you. And what I found is, I think about the makeup of my sales team right now, and I tell you, my top two of my top three reps, I mean, they blow me up all the time.
Yes.
All the time. And and the thing is, I love it because I love this about them. This is why they're so good, because of their professional persistence. But oftentimes they know what the answers are and they know how to accomplish these things without me. They either want a sounding board or maybe somebody to validate, something.
Yeah.
But it sucks me in too, and I'm guilty of it. I'm like, all right, well, I got to drop everything because Brian is going to help me get to the number, and ultimately, that's that part ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. But they are far more proactive to reach out, and that's part of why they are so good. But I have to make sure that I own my own time and say, listen, Brian, I'm glad you brought this to me. The last three times we went through this, how do we approach it?
Yeah.
Okay, just go do that, and then let me go focus on, and let me work with Dan, and let me work with Rob and Joe, etc. So
Yeah, that's interesting because I think of the top performers as kind of the lone wolf, right? And you've kind of blown up that stereotype in my head, and you're right on that now that I think about it. And you kind of already answered my next question. So, we talk about time allocation. I think you're right. It's that middle tier. That's where if we're going to make our number, top's going to get it, bottom maybe not, but boom, I'm going to blow it up in the middle.
yeah, I mean, the thing. I think I've seen it both ways. Where I've seen this lone wolf mentality, but I don't see that as sustainable
Yeah.
as a top person, regardless of the industry. And I've been am in telecommunications, SaaS, insurance. I've been across the scope, the gamut, if you will. And more often than not, when I see those top performers, maybe they aren't the most outgoing person. Maybe they aren't the person who is, raising their hand in every meeting. But what I've seen is that when it's time for them to actually deliver something, they know how to source the resources internally and externally to accomplish what they want to accomplish. And that's where I go to the idea of them being like more proactive. I can't think of one successful salesperson that I have come across in my many lives in sales, and they have gotten to their number consistently by themselves. A wise man told me once that nobody wins alone. So you need to involve as many resources as possible to help you obviously move things over the finish line. So I strongly believe that, and it's what my experience has shown me.
Do you see a pattern of so we're talking about time allocation. Let's talk about activities, sort of across. You're proactive, where you're not reacting to them, but proactively reaching out. Is there a way to sort of bucketize? Are we doing different things? Are you doing different things at all three levels of performers? And if so, what are those things that you're really bringing to each level of performer?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And to confirm, you mean, am I doing different things at each
Yes.
level?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that absolutely. So I would say with the people who, let's just say, C players, right? The entry level folks, if you will. Either they're new to the company, they're new to the role, they're new to the industry, or maybe they've been around, they just haven't broken through yet to that next level. If I'm honest there, Brian, what I would do is lump a lot of them together, because at that point in time, you haven't quite shown or earned the right to say, hey, I desire or I need one-to-one coaching. Because what you haven't done is break through with the basic blocking and tackling. So what I would say were people who are in that middle group, hey, you just need the basics, and you can put them together. And what you'll find is, or what I've learned over time, is most people's needs don't vary by kind, but more so degree. So those people who are in the C group who have yet to get to B, they aren't crossing their T's and dotting their I's on the basics.
Right.
So for them, very, very simple. You just focus on, the basics. Now, when you start to move into that secondary group, that's where you identify, okay, they understand the basics. There's a little bit of potential, and they're willing to invest a little bit. So now at that point, I now have to be a little bit more willing to invest. And I think with a lot of them, it's been my experience that, like with the A players, what they're looking for from leadership is consistency and follow through. Maybe they haven't seen that before, so it leads to a little bit of apathy on their side. So I really try to emphasize with those B's and A's: consistency, even handedness, follow through, responsiveness. In doing so, like, they've shown me a little bit of investment on their end, so I have to show a lot of investment, on my end, I should say. So I'd say with people who are in B, you could probably start to segment them out more so by, you know, based upon what is their specific position type goal or objective. So if everybody in player C, like you could just lump them together because they all need the same stuff, we'll start to maybe segment out by group in B and start to focus on those things. Now, when you get into A, I think that's where you can go individual because, quite frankly, it's fewer
Yeah.
of them. That's just the realities
Yes.
of it. And from a time standpoint, it'll allow you to get the most out of those interactions with them. And quite frankly, you got to take care of those folks. Now, I want people in B to earn that right to move into A and get that individual TLC. But what I found is that those people who are in A, they have wildly different personality types, wildly different needs, and because they've earned the right and shown that it's a good return on my investment, you can probably spend a little bit more time personalized coaching or a personalized approach with those folks.
So much of what we do is stressful, right? It's high pressure, high energy, and I wonder. It occurs to me. I wonder, like, about the human check-in. So right, there's coaching and that sort of thing, but just like that balance of how do you check in with a human and make sure that human's okay without it sounding rote. You know what I mean? Like the
Mm,
scripted check-in. Like how do I really care? How do I show these levels? What's your approach to that?
yeah, I mean, so to piggyback off of something that I said before is that level of consistency. I think in
Yeah.
our even in our personal lives, what we want from the people around us is, hey, do I know what to expect from Brian? I see him, or is he just a wild card,
Right.
every day? So a level of consistency and follow through starts to build the kind of credibility that we want so we can in turn actually ask those human questions and be humans. So first and foremost, professionally and personally, I try to be consistent with everybody. If I say I'm going to do something, I am going to do it. And if I don't do it, I will not make an excuse. I refuse to accept excuses from the people that report to me. Therefore, I refuse to give them. And I will often say, hey, I made a mistake. I messed up. And this is me leading and showing that I am a human because we all do. The first thing is I try to be consistent and I try to earn that ability to then ask them what you just described, which are actually just human questions.
Yes.
So, anecdotally speaking, or a real world example, not anecdotally, I was speaking on one of my direct reports yesterday, and we get on the phone, we hop on, and the first thing I said, hey, I say, hey man, how are you? How are you doing today? And he goes, "Oh, I'm good." But he goes right into the numbers, which I could pull from a dashboard, etc. And I say, "Hey, I was asking you as a
Yes.
as a person because I value you. It seemed like you were a little off, or what's going on. We can get to the numbers." And I was able to do that because we've established the kind
Right.
of relationship via consistency, via reliability, and I am often a human in those situations that I could say the gentleman stopped and he said, "Oh, okay." And then he switched gears and he realized I wanted to start with a human conversation, and I think we can get there, and for it to feel genuine to the people we're trying to have it with, we have to start with those other things first. Because first and foremost, I mean, we are at work, we are professionals. These people report to you or report to people who report to you. So if they don't feel they can trust you from that standpoint, it wouldn't even matter if I would have said, "Hey, I want to have a human moment with you, Brian. How are you today?" Because I hadn't earned that from the kind of consistency and reliability up front.
As you're saying this, TK, it occurs to me that I've got a couple advisors, sort of board advisors, and each one of them, on the last couple occasions that I've spoken with them, one is more on go to market strategy, the other one's more on tech, and so I like that, like you said, I jump right into either tech with this one or GTM with the other one, and both of them, now that I realize, said to me, "Wait a minute, how you doing?" CEO startup of a tech company. How you doing? How are you doing personally? And it when you said that, it really felt good. We started both of those calls with that check-in, and same thing, I was running right to the business, and as good advisors, they checked in on the human self, which was pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, I mean it's something I'll say, and I tell everybody in our organization that we put people first. We put people first, and I know it's easy not to feel that way, and the current system which we have in place. Like everybody
Yeah.
feels like a number, and we're driving year over year, quarter over quarter growth. But as I tell all the people in our organization, if you aren't right, Brian, it doesn't matter. Like we can have the best product, the best strategy, the best infrastructure, but if the people that actually have to execute these things, you know, their soul, their aura, their mind, their heart, that isn't together, it does not matter. I think being people first, saying it, but then truly living it and presenting it and
Yes.
being consistent with that, allows us to have those kinds of conversations. And you hit the nail on the head. It felt good. Somebody
Yes.
said, "Hey, how are you
Yeah. Well,
doing?"
while you were saying that, it popped up in my head, and I'm like, wow, that did. And it also, I harken back to, I had a VP of National Account Sales job, my last like a real job, and I remember one of my RVPs asking me, like, reaching up and going, "How are you doing?" Right? You've got a lot of, and I just, yeah. Thanks for bringing that up because I feel like we don't do it enough. So I have another question about your allocation. I'm realizing lately in talking to a lot of sales leaders, there's sort of some general skills coaching we do with our team, and then there's deal coaching, right? And I'm wondering how you would allocate those. Yeah, just how you view each one of those, and how you approach those.
So, skill coaching versus deal coaching.
Yeah, let me help you get this deal closed. Let me help you move this deal forward. Versus, hey, generally your discovery sucks. That.
Yeah. Uh, so I mean, two different conversations, but obviously they
Yes,
build off of one another. You'll usually, what I found is uncover the skill deficiencies in those deal conversations. That being said, I feel like we as sales leaders spend too much time on the deal piece, right? We put
interesting.
the cart before the horse, because it's like with the sales reps when we mentioned earlier, the A players, I become reactionary because they come to me and I know that they are, they're good for revenue. So I immediately focus on that thing. And this is no different. So the deal coaching comes in because people say, all right, well, this is what's closing this month or this quarter. It's on my radar now. Now it's real. And immediately I focus on that because it's my primary responsibility to, acquire revenue for the organization. Now, what can't get lost in that miss is it takes these other skills to build those are the bricks, the foundation
Yeah.
to even find that deal, move that deal forward. So I mean, the real answer to your question is, in the real world it ultimately becomes reactionary because we focus on deals. So whether your company has a deal desk, right? Like my current company does not, but I've worked at companies where, hey, we have a deal desk, people bring it through, there's a committee, we'll review it and say, well, what about this? Let's try this. Let's do this. Okay. And then right there, you end up deal coaching. That's very reactionary. Now, in my previous life, I know we touched on this in other conversations. I have a sales background, a sales enablement background. Now back into sales, my sales enablement background has taught me to look at the data and the number, not just the lagging indicator, but the leading indicator. And how do we get there? And then that needs to be a separate conversation from the deal coaching. There needs to be, let me just look at Brian holistically and look at, okay, does he have the right accounts? How is he approaching those accounts? What do the numbers tell me that when Brian actually engages the right person in that account, he has a swing, at the plate, how often is he connecting? And that's where in that separate conversation, you have to start to pull apart and be like, okay, well, looks like we have the right accounts. Looks like we've identified the right people. Looks like that we're having conversations. But for whatever reason, we have conversations. We're getting stuck at sales stage. We're getting stuck at S1. We're not getting to S2. And then right there, that's where you have to triage and say, let me work with this guy in a skills conversation on getting from S1 to S2 or S2 to S3. And I think more often than not, and just keeping it 100 with you, I think what happens is we get wrapped up in that deal desk piece, that deal coaching, where somebody brings us something and then we then become reactionary. And you know who we're missing? We're missing those people who are in the middle, who don't quite have something to bring to you. Remember earlier you said,
Yeah.
well, where would you spend most of your time? It should be in the middle. Those A players are going to bring me those deals anyway, and I end up becoming very reactionary. So in a perfect world, it would be, those would be separate conversations, and I would proactively go seek them out because I'd be like, Brian, you're a B player, but I know you can be a player. Oh, how do I get you? How do I get you from S2 to S3, S3 to S4, so you can actually come to the deal desk and have a deal coaching session? So I mean, that was a long diatribe, but I hope that I was able to give you some insight to where my opinions lie there.
Oh yeah, for sure, and especially when you mentioned lagging indicators and leading indicators, I have been parts of organizations where the coaching is an auditing of the lagging indicator, which that's an accounting function. That's not a coaching. So what I heard you say was like going to those leading indicators and truly doing the skills development and the coaching, which then drives the deals, drives the deal review. So yeah, my final question for you, it's a tricky one in that I hear from so many sales leaders about time, right? I'm in meetings, I'm doing reports, right? I'm doing whatever, and finding time. I spoke with someone the other day who said, "Yeah, we're rolling out a coaching program for your coaches, for our coaches," and it says, "Okay, but where will they find the time? You can give them the most brilliant coaching program in the world. How do you manage that? You've got to carve out that time, and so many people I talk to are struggling with. I just doing it."
No, it is very true. That is the great conundrum, right? So time is a finite resource that we can't get more of. That being said, it's why it's called making time. And
Right,
as I always tell the team, like I'm going to give you the answer. It may not be the answer you want, but it's the answer that I can give you. And ultimately, it is about making time for the things that we value and that we see benefit in. Now, here's the hard part. So going back to my previous life in the sales enablement space, like you said, you can have the most amazing program, and but if people don't value it or see it, the return on investment, they won't prioritize it.
right,
And I think part of it is us as leaders, we have to think about, what do I value the most and what do I prioritize? And then in turn, I have to make this time. So actually, I just got off of a coaching conversation with one of my direct reports, and we are having a similar thing where he said, I'm getting inundated. I got this thing comes in, this thing comes in. He goes, I don't even want to tell you how late I was on the phone last night with this customer trying to help them solve an issue in India and blah, blah, blah. And he was saying that, I can't get to some of these other things that I want to do. And so, well, listen, brother, let's talk about the concept of ownership. Ownership doesn't mean that you do all these things on your own. Like, it doesn't mean, that's not what ownership means. He said it several times, like, well, I own this and I had to take responsibility for this. Responsibility means the buck stops with you. It means that when things go well, you give all the praise to the people around you. And when things don't go well, you take responsibility for it, but never are you alone in this mix. So saying that to say is that in our conversation, I said, you got to be better about triaging what's important versus what's urgent. The urgent things are the things which, and you have ownership of both, because these are things which are just coming to you, Brian, right? Like these are things coming to you, but you had to differentiate what's urgent and what's important. And the things which are important, they must be delegated to the people that report to you and the people that you support. And this is the hardest part for high performers. So this fellow I'm speaking to, he is a leader of leaders in our
right,
organization. So I'm like, listen, you can't do all these things. I say, you pouring 10% into 10 buckets as opposed to 100% into one bucket. And, and trust me, that 10% of one bucket is putting out no fires. So what I need you to do is start to triage what all the things that you're being bombarded with day in and day out. You have ownership of these things, but I need you to take personal responsibility to accomplish what is urgent, because that is time sensitive. These things which are important, you then need to delegate out, to your people. And I said, listen, you're going to accomplish multiple things by doing this. One, you're going to free up yourself to focus on the things that you want to do, right? Like you said, like,
right,
oh, I want to do this coaching program. Well, you're going to free up time because you're going to offload some of these things that are important and still have to be done, but you don't have to individually do them. And then it's going to allow you to actually focus on, these things which are urgent and put more into it. And then the other piece is, you're going to train the people which you support. You're going to train them on what good looks like and what your expectations are, because you've said, hey, of the 20 things that come to Brian, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. These 5 things are urgent. I'll take care of these things. These 10 things are important. I'm going to offload those to TK and Dan, and I'm going to train them what good looks like or what done looks like on those things. And you're giving yourself the time to focus on the things that you want and need to. You're giving us clear expectations of what you expect, and then you're empowering us to actually execute things which come on. Because think about how many leaders just hoard everything. They
Yes.
hoard, and it's like you're serving no one but yourself.
Yeah.
So
The making time thing, TK, I love that because it just sort of exploded in my head that's no, you have to make that choice to go there. So it sort of feels like an excuse. I'm too slammed, and I've heard it over and over again. So I love that, and I'm definitely going to steal it. And speaking of making time, you've been super generous with your time and your ideas, both prepping for this and executing today. And I love one of the things I love about this work of the podcast is sharing in our community. And I feel like we don't spend the community of enterprise selling, and I feel like we don't spend enough time on what's generally called the soft skills, right? Which is the leadership stuff, the human stuff, and we're leaning more into that. And yeah, I love uh, where you went with this conversation today, and I encourage once this comes out for folks to comment. We're trying to keep this conversation going. Send TK and I a message, where we post this thing on LinkedIn or something, and give us your ideas or your challenges, whatever. But yeah, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
no, hey, thank you for having me. I enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to the candor
Yeah,
on LinkedIn as well.
cool. Thank you.